welcome to an afternoon of art and commentary by Jon Meyer, who is a fan of Tom's work and has been a friend for many years. And when he told me he was coming to the Bava Center, I was so happy, and he agreed to share some of his interests about Tom's work and comparisons with other artists' works. And his, what would you call it, resume, bio, is very impressive because he was head of many art departments and he coordinated, art professors and not just in the arts, but with dance and the, writing. And he had been in so many different situations, and in his years in art departments and head of this department and that college and this university. And it was a great joy for me to hear of his reiteration that Tom's work was so world-class, having seen so much art and been around so many artists over the years. And so, without further ado, Jon Meyer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Can you hear me okay there? Yes. Good. So I have been working on a book called His Brilliant Light, Stories of Meher Baba and His Close Ones for about 40 years. And as someone pointed out to me in the Lakeview kitchen earlier, he said, "John, it sounds like you're slow." In fact, my son Jonas, when he was a little boy, some of you might know Jonas, he's very good at computers. And so at a very young age, like 10 years old, he used to teach me about computers, and he would always tell me that I was slow. So anyway, during that time period, I got to know Tom, and we met here, we met in Asheville, we met in a number of places. And we always talked about art. Tom and I had three major, I guess you would call them priorities in our life. Meher Baba was number one, our families were number two, and art was number three. And my job as an art professor was pretty much to talk about art to the students and faculty, give presentations in various places around, and then also host art experts that came to whatever campus I was on. So, and then, we tried to get some museum curators and museum directors and art critics and art writers. So a lot of people came through who were very distinguished and had a wonderful facility with the history of art and understanding of art. But let me say that none of them were better at understanding and remembering the entire history of art. I'll give you some examples. Then Tom Riley, let me give you some examples. I would be sitting with Tom, we'd start talking about art, and a name of an artist would come up. And Tom would stop me and he said, "Oh, let's talk about this one for a while." I remember, and let's say this was in 1980 or 1985. Tom would say, "Back in 1960, I went to such and such a museum, and in the third gallery down on the left, there was a painting of that artist's work, and the work next to it was by this artist, and on the other side was this artist, and here are the details from the work." He had that kind of encyclopedic memory. It was really pretty astounding. And so we love to talk about art, and Tom not only could remember art and artists through the museums, but also if you talk to him about an art movement, like the Expressionists or 19th century American painting, then he would give half a dozen examples of artists, name the titles and dates of all of the pieces that he liked, and then compare and relate them to other artists of the time. So that's the depth of understanding and incredible memory that Tom had. Now, he came out of a long Irish tradition, Irish storytellers. And how do you pronounce that in Gaelic, Kathy?
So Shawnee is the way I remember it, and definitely Tom was a
20
Shawnee.
years. That meant that you had to prove to your colleagues that you had this understanding of the stories of Irish history and the stories of the heroes, etc. And so Tom benefited from that lineage. To give you another example of how astute and the incredible memory that those people had, Tom grew up in Woodstock, New York, and so a lot of people from New York City came up to Woodstock, New York in the summertime, and there were a lot of distinguished people that came to Woodstock or lived there. There were prominent composers and musicians and architects and artists and writers. One of the people he met was Joseph Campbell, you know, Hero with a Thousand Faces, and many other books. And so Tom met him. He was invited over for tea at a lady's house that he knew. And Joseph Campbell told the story, and Tom loved retelling this story, that Joseph Campbell was doing research in Baghdad, and he was very interested in the history of folklore and tales and storytelling. And so some people recommended that he go out to this village outside of Baghdad, out in Iraq, some miles away, and talk to a storyteller there. So Joseph Campbell did that, and he brought a translator, and he had a tape recorder. So he talked to this, you know, introduced himself, talked to this storyteller. Now the whole village was illiterate, and it's likely that this storyteller was illiterate as well. But the storyteller decided to tell Joseph Campbell the story of Gilgamesh, who lived in 2700 BC. So now imagine Joseph Campbell maybe 20 or 30 years ago talking to the storyteller who was telling the story of Gilgamesh from almost 5,000 years before. So Tom recorded all of that and translated all of it, had his translator translate it. Joseph Campbell then went back to Baghdad and talked to some archaeologists who were deciphering and translating cuneiform tablets from that era of almost 5,000 years ago. And Joseph Campbell was astounded that the stories that this storyteller told him were just about word for word to what had been written down on these cuneiform tablets almost 5,000 years ago. So that had been passed down through the generations of storyteller to storyteller, and they kept it very accurately. And Africa has a storytelling tradition, as does Ireland. And the storytelling traditions of those places is very strong. And I guess that was Tom's heritage. That's what he inherited from Ireland. So we talked a lot about art. And one of the things that I really appreciated about Tom, that I believe is the difference between a good artist, a good painter, and a great one, is that Tom used a lot of visual metaphor. Now, I'm sure many of you have read Hafez. You know, Hafez was not just an old wino talking about wine. He was using wine as a metaphor, right? Fair Day?
Yeah.
So he, like many of the prominent writers from history, developed metaphors in their language, in their poetry, in their ghazals, and used those to enrich the writing that they did. And likewise, in the visual realm, the great painters and the great artists use visual metaphor in the same way. So Tom, knowing all of that, I like to pick up this paintbrush. Tom had that encyclopedic memory. He met Meher Baba, and when he first met Meher Baba, I have a quote here. Baba asked him, I guess it was in Mandalay Hall, right, in Mehrabad.
No.
In Marazad.
No, this was at Guru Prasad.
Guru Prasad, okay. So Baba asked Tom if he had ever read God Speaks, and Tom said, yes, I read it 3 times. And there was all of Mandalay and a crowd there. And so Baba put Tom on the spot. He said, can you tell us in a nutshell what God Speaks is about? And this is a quote. This was Tom's answer. Bingo. Tom's answer was, the whole of creation exists so the soul can find its way back to you. And Baba was very pleased. And everyone in the crowd was murmuring like, wow, we had no idea that this guy could summarize God Speaks in a sentence. Pretty astounding. So I'd like to talk about the visual metaphors of Tom Riley's paintings. And let's, I guess I'll have to wander here from the microphone. And maybe you can all hear me, and maybe the microphone can still pick it up. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning of his painting career, Tom loved Albert Pinkham Ryder. And also Tom had, during the summer of his schools, in order to make money, he had managed to wangle himself into being a merchant seaman because it paid very well. He went to sea. He loved the sea. And he expounded very eloquently about the colors of the sea and the texture of the waves and how much that meant to him and how inspirational it was. So these first paintings, before he started painting Meher Baba, have a very strong influence from Albert Pinkham Ryder in the metaphors used of the sea and the white caps and the gray skies. Now, at that time, abstract expressionism was coming in the 50s, and so you see the color fields here that were used. So the sky is not painted in exacting detail, it's painted in wonderful color field brush strokes.
Would you like to click on the writer? Would you like the?
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
click on the writer. Yeah, that one is a...
Is that a good one to?
Yeah, that shows, it's got some crizzling on the surface, but it shows Albert Pinkham Ryder became very well known and very well respected for this kind of abstract sky. And you can see some similarities here in what Tom painted. If you look at the one down on the end there, similar kind of thing, a little bit more colorful. And then, after Tom met Meher Baba, he decided that he was going to include Meher Baba in his painting because Meher Baba was such a focus for him. So this is the first painting from 1956, and that has Meher Baba in a rowboat, and it's called His Awakening. And then in a very small boat out to sea here is Tom. So the metaphor there is that before he met Meher Baba, he felt that he was adrift in the ocean. Now, picture yourself in a rowboat out in the middle of the ocean, adrift. I think you would be anxious and hoping for rescue. and along comes Meher Baba in his rowboat to rescue Tom. And this is Winslow Homer's painting of the fog here, and the fisherman is quite anxious in the rowboat there, looking off to the storm brewing in the distance, wondering, perhaps he has his catch there in the boat, some fish. He's wondering if he's going to make it back to shore before the storm hits. So it has that same kind of rowboat feeling and the metaphor of anxiousness and being at sea. So that was the first of what I call the rescue paintings. Baba comes to rescue Tom. Have any of you ever felt that you needed rescuing by Meher Baba?
Every day.
So Tom certainly felt that, and he expressed it in his painting. So now over here, there's a couple of more paintings with this same kind of influence from Albert Pickton Ryder. Also, Kathy, could you bring up the amongst the screen?
Mm-hmm.
He also was influenced by Expressionism. And you see in the sky of the screen, we're not going to look at the figure too much, although how can you not? I mean, talk about a metaphor of anxiety. This is, I feel like that sometimes. Do any of you feel that way? I mean, that is a metaphor for anxiety, and Munch added that wavy color to the sky. Now, you know, Phyllis Frederick used to talk about auras and the colors of auras and how those really depicted people's states of mind. But also in the regular world, you know, we talk about, you know, we hope you are not experiencing gray skies, we hope your skies are blue, and that is a color metaphor for how we feel and what our state of mind is. So Tom used the same thing, and the same kind of metaphor, even a little bit of the same color and motion there from amongst the screen. But so that's the language. But now in his vocabulary, he's adding the waves, the caps of the waves, and then after a period of time, Meher Baba. And so then he focused a lot more on Meher Baba. So after the fog warning, let's go to Jericho, the raft of the Medusa. And I'd like to just show that as an antecedent and comparison to this voyage painting that Tom did with Meher Baba. Now, in this one, in the raft of the Medusa, we have a famous event. This is a very journalistic painting, believe it or not, because the Medusa was a sailing ship from the early 1800s. And due to incompetence of the captain, it ran aground. And then what happened was the captain and the elite people on board took all the lifeboats and they left the common people on board to just founder in the waves, and they built themselves a raft to try to get to land. And here they are. Out of 1,500 people that were the common people left on the boat, 5 of them survived. So here you see this very strong diagonal, one of the great paintings of art history. And it is, that diagonal is surmounted by this fellow stripped to the waist, waving a flag in a very, very tiny boat off in the distance, hoping for rescue. So we come back to rescue again. So here's another Tom Riley rescue painting. In this one, it has a lot happier ending. Why? Because here is Tom scrambling up over the transom, the stern of the boat, trying to get in, as Baba, as it says in the Gujarati Arti, he is the captain of our ship. He's certainly the captain here rowing the ship. His hair is waving in the breeze. They're approaching the Irish coast, which was another wonderful part of Tom's imagination. Baba was taking him back to the Irish coast. And it looks like he's going to make it. He's going to get in the boat, but we're not 100% sure yet. Maybe Tom wasn't 100% sure yet that Baba was really going to complete the rescue and take him back. We all have our moments where we're saying, Baba, are you going to rescue me? We hope you are.
There's I would love to interject Tom's little blurb about this painting, which was one of his favorites. A voyage beyond. His direction will awaken you and take you to his dwelling place within. I imagine Baba off the Irish coast, bringing me home. I am the last young man managing to climb aboard.
So he's just barely making it, and Baba is rescuing him. Another wonderful rescue painting. So, Kathy, could we try now the Matisse La Danse? Thank you. So, you may have seen this. There are a number of different versions of this. This is Pierre Matisse's, one of his most famous works of art, because it depicts joy. These people are dancing for joy. And I guess, you know, with the anxiety of wanting to be rescued, many of us feel Baba's joy too, right? So here is Tom over in this painting. I don't know whether you can see this or not, but there's a ring of dancing Baba lovers, dancing for joy in here. And yes, this is very different. It has different detail. It's much more expressionistic. It has far less detail than this one. Baba is looking in the mirror, and he's seeing his reflection in all of us. And then you have a very vertical landscape in the background. The picture plane has really been flattened, as was developing in the 60s and 70s, and Richard Diebenkorn was a protagonist of developing flattened backgrounds. So I don't know this 100%, but it's very possible that Tom saw some of that work too. So, you know, when he picked up his paintbrush, through his mind and spirit, his connection to Baba, down his arm and into his paintbrush, he had the whole history of art at his disposal. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one. Oh, the Helen Baum of the Samadhi, right over here. So, I'm sure you're all familiar with Helen Downs' work in the Samadhi. This is an expressionist painting, and Tom went in there many times, and so this undoubtedly was an influence on him. And again, in the expressionist time period, there were color fields. It wasn't at all 3D modeled like the Giotto or Cimabue did in the Renaissance. This was very flat color, but very expressionistic. And here are all these people that are worshipers, worshiping in the Samadhi on the walls. And so, another metaphor. Tom really liked Helen Dahm's work. And then let's take a quick look at Mark Rothko's color field paintings here. So Mark Rothko in the 50s and 60s was a very, very prominent contemporary painter. and worked with pure color. So we talk about the metaphor of color. Mark Rothko once said that I want my audience to weep in front of my paintings. And if any of you ever get to Houston, there's a place there called the Rothko Chapel. Have you been there? Yeah, and so you know, you walk in there and it's surrounded by Mark Rothko's paintings. And the presence of the spirit that he's brought through those paintings is palpable. It is palpable. And that, he wanted to make spiritual paintings using pure color. And he was successful at it. I know that as an experiment, when our younger son Rustum was in his stroller, Deb and I took him to the National Museum in Washington, and they had on exhibitions of the prominent painters of art of the time. And we brought him into and each of those painters, Ellsworth Kelly, Mark Rothko, Jackson Pollock, many others, had their own gallery there. And when we brought Rustum into the gallery with Mark Rothko, he responded emotionally, even though he was a little boy in a stroller. He responded to each of the paintings, non-verbally. He just responded with his mood, his expression. And Deb and I thought this was really quite amazing. So we said, okay, let's take him back through in a different order to see if he really has the same emotional response to these paintings, and he did. So what does that say about the basic human response to color and to visual color metaphor? Thank you, Kathy. And then we'll look at the George Innes one. Now, we don't have this painting here because it's hanging in our house. And so, nonetheless, it's meeting in a sacred place, and Tom, I guess, is meeting Baba here. And it has the same kind of light. You know, it's no accident that the title of this book is More Light. It has the same kind of light quality. Tom also liked J.M.W. Turner's work, which had this kind of quality about it too. Intense light through, kind of ethereal fog and lighting up the whole sky that way. So that was another influence of Tom. Kathy? Yeah.
So Tom has written about this painting, meeting in a sacred place. The essence of our being is fulfilled through meeting him in a sacred place. This comes through longing. Here I imagine being with Baba once again, gifted by his sacredness. Once again with him, gifted by his light and love.
Yes.
Yeah, am I remembering correctly? This also reminds me of the Hudson School.
Yes.
It has that same sense of
Thomas
light
Cole,
and trees.
The
Yep.
Voyage of Life.
Yep.
Yes. Wonderful paintings about the essence of what life is. And that's what Tom painted about. And so using his love for Meher Baba, his incredible memory about the history of art, and at his beck and call, all of the images of the greatest artists ever. And then, in addition to that, his color metaphors and being able to depict Baba and himself in many of the paintings gives us a sense of Tom's great love for Baba, his love for the sea, and some of the struggles he was going through. The anxiety of being adrift, that kind of thing that many of us experience, and the joy, as we saw in his painting with the Bible lovers dancing around a circle like Matisse's Joy.
There's a longer piece in the back of Tom's autobiography, and just a little snippet from this Meher Baba and Art that Tom has written. I see art as a process of linking one's energy to the divine. It is an attempt at freeing or liberating the sacred within oneself. The practice of art helps in developing a deeper relationship between the lover and the divine beloved. The creative life is the conscious desire of the soul to know itself through art.
There's so many gems in this book. I'd just like to point out another one, and that is that when Tom was in India, he had never met Mara because she was sequestered from the men. And he was walking across the compound there, the little garden outside of Baba's house, and he didn't want to get too close to Mara because he understood that she was sequestered. And she called to him, almost recognized him, and said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Tom Riley." And this is what she said. He said, "What is your name?" And then she said, "Oh, Baba loved you." Baba loved you. He loves us all. Thank you.
Thank you, John. This was wonderful for me, and I just enjoy speaking about Tom's connection to Baba and through art. It means a lot. As many of us here I see are artists of different sorts, so we're all creating that pathway through our artistic endeavors. And thank you for coming. And
I'm just carrying this a little further because what strikes me about this is also Tom's affinity with Woodstock, New York.
Yes,
and
he
the
loved
Hudson
Woodstock
School.
where he
Yeah.
grew up.
Yeah, so I just remembered as I was looking at it, there's a interesting linear history there.
Yeah, very much so.
I mean, he felt so fortunate to have been born and, you know, come up in that art colony that was just flourishing with people who dedicated their lives to that quest. I don't know, some of you have seen this. Joe Stewart put, what's his name? Suzanne. Oh, can we do this? Uh-oh.
Tom Riley tells his tale of his journey to Meher Baba, about his early life in Woodstock and his longing to see Jesus. He shares his love for art and the music of Bach and Mozart. The army thought he was crazy when he told them he'd meet Jesus while packing books in Woodstock. He saw a picture of Baba. Baba got him on his wavelength, and he let Tom's heart answer that he's always been his lover. In more light, Tom takes us with him while we drink of Baba's wine, and we know that we can trust him, for he's touched all of our hearts with Baba's love. Tom contacts Baba's followers to find his way to Meher Baba. And he spent a long time wondering when he physically would see him. Then the Winterfelds rolled and told him he'd see Baba at Meher Center. Baba's gaze soon upon him, captivated by his love. Then a message came from Baba that he wanted to see Tom. They met in Lagoon Cabin. A radiant light consumed him, and Tom reached for Baba's hand. In more light, Tom takes us with him while we drink of Baba's wine. And we know that we can trust him, for he's touched all of our hearts with Baba's love. Years past, he followed Baba, living in the town of Woodstock. Tom's fulfillment as an artist, inspired by Meher Baba. Time came to visit India for the East and West gathering. In Baba's divine wisdom, he didn't make the journey easy. Tom arrived in Pune early, filled with Baba's presence, thinking only of Baba. Tom waited and took comfort in a half-his clothes. In more light, Tom takes us with him while we drink of Baba's wine. And we know that we can trust him, for he's touched all of our hearts with Baba's love. There was a knock upon his door. It was Francis Barber's arm. There, Baba sent me to tell you that he wants to see you now. So he got inside his car, a fellow Irishman beside him. They drove with anticipation, both of them in tears. He arrived and there was Baba, radiating his divinity. Tom rushed to Baba's feet, put his head upon his knees, then he wept. In more light, Tom takes us with him while we drink of Baba's wine. And we know that we can trust him, for he's touched all of our hearts with more light.
Yeah, that was Joe Stewart singing.
Wow, that was amazing.